Palestinian shields. What does Israel do? Israel goes in there when they have to, as they did in 2014 on the ground. They tell people to get out of harm's way. They send leaflets. They do text messages, millions of them. They call people. When they've been on the ground since 2 weeks after October 7th, they tell people where to go. Hamas tells people not to go to safe zones. And so that helps gives context to the whole narrative of what's going on in the war. Israel does one thing to protect Palestinians. Hamas does the very opposite. And yet, that's part of the media battle, in addition to the military and spiritual battle.
You know, and if I can add to what Chris just said, it's important for everybody to understand that Hamas is not a Palestinian liberation organization. They don't care at all about the Palestinian people. They publicly stated that. They said to care for the Palestinian people, it's the role of the United Nations, it's UNRWA. We are there to annihilate Israel. Their charter says our role of existence, our reason for existence is to free every square inch of Israel of Jewish occupation. That's how they call it. That means they will be only satisfied when the last Jew is leaving Israel and moving to the U.S. or to Europe. And it's an anti-Semitic demonic force. I think otherwise you cannot explain it, what's happening. That when on October 7, you really were looking in the face of Satan and of hell. The things that took place on that day, I don't think even animals would do something like that.
You mentioned the bomb shelters. So not every Israeli has a bomb shelter in their actual apartment. Some of the older apartments, you have to run down 10 flights of stairs to the community bomb shelter. But bomb shelters are designed for rockets and missiles. They're not designed for terrorists to invade. This was over 3,000 Hamas terrorists who were invading and killing everybody they saw. Men, women, children. They were killing women, mothers in front of their children. They were killing the children in front of the parents. They were beheading babies. They were setting whole families on fire in their house with gasoline that they brought from Gaza. Like it was demonic. There was literally, and I just came from a moment ago just watching the 45-minute compilation of GoPro footage that Hamas filmed of themselves doing this, chopping people's heads off. I mean, my circuit blew for the last hour. I'm glad there's been a little bit of gap, and I live there. I've been covering it. We've been covering it, but this is, anyway, so what I want to say is one of the stories that we did on the Rosenberg Report was an hour special about a couple. He's a very famous reporter in Israel, young 40s maybe. He and his wife have 2 young daughters, both less than 4, and for 10 hours they hid in their safe room. But there's no lock on a safe room because it's not designed to protect you from terrorists trying to come in and chop your head off. So they got into the bomb shelter that morning in one of in the closest community to the actual border. It's a mile. It's 1.4 kilometers. It's the walking distance from the Washington Monument to the Capitol building in Washington. So they're locked in there, not locked in, they're in there, and they don't have any air conditioning. They don't have any light. They can't make a sound. They've got 2 little girls that are terrified. The rockets come in, boom, 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 boom. The sirens are wailing. And then they start hearing machine gun fire, and they hear Arabic, Allahu Akbar, and they can hear their neighbors are being murdered. And for 10 hours, they hid in that bomb shelter, terrified that there's no way to, people tried, but people, they would just shoot you through the door. And I'm just saying, but anyway, it's an amazing story because this guy's, Meir's father is a retired general, a very famous general in Israel, but he's like in his mid-60s. He grabs his 9mm and his wife and says, let's go rescue the grandkids. So they go driving down from Tel Aviv, and they're racing as fast as they can, but they get to a checkpoint, and the police are like, no, you can't go south. And they're like, but our grandchildren, no, you can't do it. So Israelis don't really listen. They just went off-road, and they went around, and then they got to another checkpoint, and now it's military, not police. And they're like, no, you cannot go south. He's like, then shoot us. And he just blows through the checkpoint. They get 10 minutes from the house. And the kids are texting. They can't say anything, but their adult kids are, help us. How far away? We're 10 minutes away. Don't worry. But they meet a couple that is running from the Nova Music Festival, where 340 Israelis were gunned down point blank. 40 were taken hostage, and these people are stricken. I mean, they're just covered in blood, and they're okay. Get in the car. We'll take you to safety. So now they're 10 minutes from the house, and they can't. So they take them to safety. Then they turn around. They come back. And now they find a firefight with Israeli soldiers are in a firefight with Hamas terrorists. So, and there's wounded. So they sneak in, they get the wounded into the car, and the father, or the grandfather in a sense, says to his wife, go to the hospital, just leave me, get out of here. So he grabs an M4 machine gun, automatic rifle, from a dead Israeli soldier, and he, who's 30 or 40 years older than everybody else, Israeli soldiers, he starts directing them, and they go and kill the hostages, or the terrorists. Well, now, but he doesn't have a car. Now he's 5 minutes away. Anyway, this story keeps going, and that's just one.
That's just one story of the
thousands that day.
You know, as we're talking, something's come up a number of times about the Hamas charter, about wanting Israel wiped off the map, and one of the critiques is that Israel should negotiate. We hear about hostage negotiations, all these things. How do you respond, Chris, to this idea? I mean, can you negotiate with a force that wants the entire country wiped off of a map?
No, they're very clear about that, and what they want. I was going to add to what Jurgen said, is there's a concept in Islam of the house of peace and the house of war. The house of peace is that part of the world that is under the subjugation of Islam. The house of war is that part of the world that is not under the subjugation of Islam. And for Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the goal of faithful Muslim is to subjugate the house of war. So that's the battle, and it's not just a territorial battle. It's not for a two-state solution. It's for a one-state solution. And added to the sense of, this land, it was under Muslim rule for hundreds of years under the Ottoman Empire. And the goal of a group like Hamas is to take that land back and put it back under Islam. And the fact that the Jewish people are in charge of the land makes it all the more that they need to kill the Jews. We've done a couple of stories on Hamas summer camps where they will train young men and boys and train them to do exactly what was happening on October 7th. And we were able to put the footage from the summer camps and the footage from October 7th. And it's eerie how similar it looks of how these young boys were trained. And when you look at what they've done since 2007, they've trained a generation to kill Jews and to take back this land that was once under Islam.
Yeah, there's something else going on, and we've seen it since October 7th, reactions on college campuses, this pro-Palestinian, really pro-Hamas at moments, rhetoric, signage. Dr. Buhler, what do you make of that? What is it like to see that kind of messaging coming from Western students and young people?
Well, you just said how significant or realistic or should we negotiate with terrorists. And if we take into account what you just said, that after October 7, before any Israeli soldier put their foot on Gaza or did anything, they were just defending themselves. You already had hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the streets in London, in Paris, in Berlin, I believe in the United States. That means there is a massive radical Islamized community all around the world, and they are watching very carefully what is taking place in Israel. If they realize that Hamas is even having a slight chance of winning, and they are starting to negotiate with them, it's a message to the Muslims in your country, it's a message to the Muslims in Europe, in London, and Paris, that they say, if we employ the same technique what they are doing, we can succeed to take over the countries where we are living in. So that's why it's very, very important that Israel has the support of the United States, that they finish the job, that they don't negotiate with terrorists, that they are taking care of Hamas, that they are wiped out. And it will not only be a new season for Israel, it will be a new season for the people in Gaza. and it will send a signal around the world that there is no nonsense policy with terrorism. And that's why it's absolutely important that every nation and believers, the churches, they stand with Israel and support Israel in what they are doing right now.
However, I mean, I agree with all of that, except there's a huge movement, I would say almost unanimity in Israel, that pressuring the Israeli government, bring these hostages home, all of them now. Right?
That's right.
Hashtag bring them all home now. Because Hamas, in their evil genius, they took advantage of the fact that we felt very much secure on the 6th of October. We had peace treaties, 6 Arab-Israeli peace treaties, including the Abraham Accords, which we've all been very excited about and supportive of, and we thought the Saudi-Israeli peace deal was inbound, right? So that was part of the evil genius, make Israel feel secure, and then invade them. That was one. But the second thing was this idea that Israel has historically tried not to negotiate, but what the plan was not just kill everybody, kill as many as you can, but take hundreds of Israelis back, because then they won't invade, then they won't attack, then they will have to surrender, and we will show how great, the radical Islamist guys. This has complicated things enormously. But Israel has made the decision, we have to negotiate. We do it through the U.S., the Egyptians, the Qataris. But I would say one of the things that All Israel News is doing with us, our daily digital site, is we're launching this week the hashtag set the captives free, right? Because what hashtag bring them all home, which I agree with, that's what they're saying. Not to surrender, but you can't just win. Part of the goal is to get our own people back, because they were just sleeping in their bed. We have a social contract. You can't just let people invade your country, right? You got border problems here, we've got border problems there. But just to wrap that up, hashtag bring them all home now is an appeal to the Israeli government. Don't forget, we've got at originally like 240 hostages, babies, children, but hashtag set the captives free is an appeal to Isaiah 61. That ultimately, if the Israeli government and military alone could get all these people out, it would have happened by now. So we need to intensify, especially, as even told us, this is what the Messiah came to do. This is what the prophecy is about. He comes to set the captives free. Yes, spiritually. But, he also cares about people that are trapped in cages in tunnels, which Chris and I have been in those tunnels. We went into Gaza, and I'm telling you, it is a very difficult, painful tension right now in Israel. We have to win. We have to do everything humanly possible to get those hostages back. Otherwise, the contract breaks down in a small country.
You mentioned the tunnels. The tunnels have been a big piece of a lot of the coverage around this. You were just there. Chris, tell us a little bit about the experience, what you saw and experienced there.
Yeah, we've been trying to get into Gaza. I know you have as well, Joel, and got a phone call Saturday night about 3 weeks ago from the IDF chief spokesman to say, get ready to go down to Gaza. And next morning, Joel and I drove down to a rendezvous point right on the border with Gaza. We had the opportunity to join 16 other journalists and cameramen to go into Gaza with 3 APCs, armored personnel carriers. It took about a little over an hour to get to our rendezvous point in Gaza, which was Khan Yunis. And we got to a depression that had been a building, and we saw the entrance to one of the terror tunnels. We had a briefing by General Buhler. He's the commander of the 98th Division there, and he was just telling us that there were tunnel shafts everywhere in Gaza.
5,700, he said.
Yeah.
5,700 shafts.
Yeah. Wow. In supermarkets, in schools, in homes, in mosques. Everywhere were these tunnels in there. And my feeling when I first went in there was like, you've seen video of the tunnels themselves, and you get to go see firsthand what Hamas has been building for 18 years. The construction is excellent in the sense that these are functional terror tunnels. This one was 1,000 kilometers, well over half a mile. And we could see, they were almost like a spider web as well. Sometimes tunnels would go off to either side. This, as the general said, was a strategic tunnel, not a tactical tunnel, which was used by fighters to go from place to place, but where leaders would be. His sense was that U.S. Sinwar was in that tunnel at one time. But the most important...
The chief of Hamas in Gaza.
Exactly, yes. I think the most telling thing for us, the most emotional and impactful thing, was the fact that we got to see a room where they had constructed a new cage where 12 of the hostages had been held, and 3 of those 12 were freed. So they knew exactly where they were. We're talking about 75 feet underground, hot, humid. It was quite an experience. And Joel and I, we had the privilege, really, because not everybody's going into a terror tunnel in Gaza. We had the privilege to pray there on site for the freedom for the rest of the hostages, and particularly for the comfort of the families that are just in such anguish right now.
And then the whole thing surprised me. I mean, I never thought Joel Rosenberg should be anywhere in or near Gaza. So it was really remarkable to be in there as a journalist. But then as a believer, you're a believer. So if you're standing in a cage where Israelis have been held, and if you're standing in the lair of Yahya Sinwar, the chief evil, genocidal mastermind of this whole thing, you're thinking, this is sheer evil. And we need to pray in the name of Jesus Christ to, Lord, break this stronghold. So that was all extraordinary. But then, wait, there was more. When we came out of these tunnels, and again, there's 350 miles of tunnels. There's more terror tunnels than there are subway tunnels in London.
How much money and resource would to build this without doing other things you would do for a population?
Yeah, billions. It's all been wasted. But just as when you were about to get back in the armored personnel carrier to go back to freedom, and you're on this hellish planet that's right next to Israel, you're thinking, it's just so surreal. But Chris, my dear brother and the dean of Christian journalism in the Middle East, he surprised me. He says, would you like to take communion? Communion? He pulls out crackers, and he pulls out a little, actually he put it in a plastic gum container, but he put grape juice in there. He's like, I'm like, absolutely. I wish I'd thought of it myself, but only one of us needed to. So thank you for doing that. And we just bowed our heads. Khan Yunis, the worst fighting in two straight months. It's just hellish there. And we can hear the bullets, and we can hear the bombs around us, and just bowing your heads and taking communion, the Lord's Supper, in the epicenter of evil, and asking, Lord, redeem the land, save the people, save Israel, and break the stronghold of Satan. It was a day that is unlike any other day. And I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Iraq 4 times, but that was unlike anything, and I wish I thought of that, but that's what being with a brother in Christ is about, who thinks better.
And in all this, the word evil has been brought up a number of times, and recognizing that things are happening that we are not necessarily seeing. We're seeing the results of that play out. I want to pivot a little bit into the West's relationship with Israel. Right now, Dr. Buhler, how are people inside of Israel feeling about the West's response so far to October 7th?
I think initially Israel was extremely surprised at the wave of support that came from the United States, from Europe, from parties which nobody believed they would stand with Israel. The Green Party, which is super leftist, super liberal, they made some of the most amazing statements supporting Israel. The question now is how long this will last. And what we see right now is that one after the other of those nations, they are bowing down to the pressure of the Islamic world, and they say, we need now a ceasefire, we need to have a Palestinian state, the PA need to take over Gaza, and these are all solutions that will not lead to anything.
The Palestinian Authority, and by the way, Mahmoud Abbas was the head of that. I think he's serving the 19th year of his 4-year term, and 89% of Palestinians by a Palestinian polling firm think he's too corrupt and he needs to leave immediately. So he's supposed to be in charge.
Yeah, and he basically says that, their charter is not too much different from Hamas. They feel Israel is occupied, their school books, they don't have Tel Aviv there, they don't speak about Israeli cities. They believe all of Israel is an occupied area that needs to be liberated, and they want to give them the Gaza Strip, which is horrendous. So right now it's a battle where I believe believers around the world, they are challenged to talk to their governments that Israel has the freedom, I understand fully and I agree, there needs to be freedom for the hostages, but I would say let's leave this an Israeli problem, let them deal with them, but let the world send a signal to Israel, you have all the freedom, all the liberty, all the time you need in order to deal with Hamas. And thanks God, until now the support came, but we have to pray that the support stays steadfast.
Billy, I would say one thing after October 7th, too. I've never seen the Jewish people feeling so alone, so isolated, so surrounded. And I think this is a time more than ever, and maybe in the history of the ICEJ, and our own histories there in Israel, of supporting, praying for, standing with the Jewish people in Israel and around the world, and praying for the Palestinian people, too, to be free of a tyranny like Hamas that they've lived under for almost 20 years or more. But standing with the Jewish people, I just wanted to say, Jurgen has 2 sons that have been in Gaza.
Fighting,
and he just has remarkable stories about them.
Do you want to reflect? I would love to hear whatever you're willing to share or can share about, because that's a direct impact. Obviously, you were all impacted on your family, having them serving in that way.
Well, we have 2 boys who are serving in the army. One is in Gaza, the other is in the supportive unit. And we are experiencing on our own skin what every family in Israel is going through. We are part of a parents group of Israeli parents. My son is in a unit. It's the Dutra machine. It's the unit that was with Moti Gur liberating Jerusalem and the Six-Day War. And one of the mothers just maybe 2 weeks, a month ago, she was writing to the group, who of you is joining me? So she was writing that to the parents. Who of you is joining me a detox tour after the war because I can't sleep anymore without sleeping pill and without alcohol? And within a minute, dozens and dozens of replies. Yes, I join. Me too. Thanks for sharing that. I need help too. And I want to thank everybody who is praying for us. And I have to tell you that we feel the prayer of people around the world. That we are at peace. We know our boy is where he needs to be at this time. When we dropped him off to the gathering point on October 7, when he was drafted in, my wife was crying, of course. Our boy was running back, hugging her again, which he never did in his whole life before. And so my wife was very emotional and upset. So a man came to her and she said it was like a divine appointment. He looked in her face with an amazing shining face. And he looked at her and says, "Don't worry, everything will be good." And that night she had a dream and she saw a big lion, and she understood it's Yeshua, it's Jesus, the Lion of Judah, and a little lion with the face of our son standing before him. And the mane of the big lion was collecting all the shrapnel that was around there. And my wife knew from that moment that our boy is safe and that God will take care of him. And our son came back from the battlefield, and I think at least 3 times he was telling us, he says, "Daddy, I feel people are praying for me. I shouldn't be alive anymore." He said literally several times, he says, either Hamas are the worst shooters in the whole universe, or God is answering prayer. And he says, we hear sometimes the bullet flying around our head, and he says, in a strange way, I feel secure, I know God is with me. And one time they came under friendly fire, an Israeli tank thought they are terrorists, they were shooting on them. And a tank missile was exploding among the boys where my son is serving. Normally, if something like that happened, that's several casualties at least and many injured. On that incident, not a single boy of the Israeli soldiers were injured on that day. And there are stories after stories where he tells, I really feel that people are praying. So I want to back what Chris said. Israel needs your prayer. We are gathering every day in a global prayer gathering, people around the world praying since October 7, every single day for Israel. And I think it's the most important thing the church can do today.
We added to that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Israeli believers, evangelical and messianic followers of Jesus.
More than 800.
Yeah, I think because active duty, you probably have 3 to 350 at any given moment. But when you bring up all the reserves, you've got people up to 40, 45 years old, sometimes actually older, who are believers. Now some of they're strong believers, and they are deployed, and they are fighting or in support units. And this is the darkest hour that Israel has ever been in, at least since 1948, a year that went on, a year and a half, the War of Independence. And so people are, they don't know what's going to happen to them tomorrow. But Jesus is equipping and sending his there are Israelis who love their country and they love the Lord Jesus, and they are witnesses inside those tanks, inside those tunnels, inside those units. I have 2 sons that have served in the Army. They're not in this war. They're doing humanitarian relief with the Joshua Fund. And they felt conflicted because their friends are getting wounded and dying, but God has them doing humanitarian relief and serving and strengthening the local church to provide. And everywhere we go, and everywhere they go, we hear stories of a nation that has been so rattled to its core, who felt so secure, even at the government level, right? So secure on October 6th that there were only 18-year-old girls looking at CCTV monitors on that border. That's insane. If I'd written a novel that 3,000 Hamas terrorists would surge in and there'd be no combat soldiers on that border, even my own publisher, even having sold 5 million copies of it, it's ridiculous. The government's never going to allow that border just to be invaded. Well, they did. That's a separate issue. I'm not trying to speak politically. What I'm saying is Israel was blindsided and the country's rattled. And yet, the doors, the hearts, the conversations are opening. People want to talk about God. They want to talk about the Bible. They are willing to even talk about Yeshua with people around them that they either love and trust or that are serving them. You got volunteers flying in, not a lot, but still more than you might expect, to cut vegetables and make meals and deliver hot meals to soldiers. And we're covering these type of stories, and the Joshua Fund, among all these other ministries, are doing this every day to strengthen the local believers to be a witness. Now, I'm not saying we're having a wave of everybody's coming to faith.
But there's an impact.
There's a huge moment here that's not normal. It's not normal. It fits in about a 15-year period of more openness, I think, than historically ever among Jews to considering Jesus as Messiah. But this is different than any other time that any of us have ever experienced or maybe even read about. And so that's why we need prayer too, because Satan came to rob, kill, and destroy on the 7th, and every day since. But Jesus is coming that it may have life and have it abundantly. And so it ultimately is a spiritual battle. And so we have to pray at multiple levels for multiple impacts. 134 hostages, we need them all back. Every single soldier, 400,000 soldiers and reservists, we need them safe, we need them to be strong. And then 10 million Israelis who don't know what's going to happen when they die. And they're at grave risk. They need to know that there's a shepherd who loves them. And if you wander away from the good shepherd, they don't know that Jesus is the shepherd. But even Psalm 23, they don't know that they need a shepherd and that there are ravaged, savage wolves out there ready to devour us. And if you wander away from your shepherd as a sheep, you're in grave danger, physically, but also spiritually. So we've got to be able to walk and chew gum on all these fronts simultaneously.
So I hate to end on this question because I actually wanted to end on prayer, and you gave some great prayer points. Prayer is powerful. We need to be doing it. But I do want to ask Chris, I'm going to give you the final question here. This is all happening during an election year in America. Mm-hmm. And it would seem there is a lot at stake, depending on what happens, depending on who ends up in. How can we be praying for that? And what is at stake politically in America when it comes to our support for Israel?
I would say go back to Genesis 12, 2 and 3, 1, 2, and 3. Those that bless Israel will be blessed. Those that curse Israel will be cursed. There's also something in the book of Joel that says we're in the valley of decision because they divided God's land. And I think it's important to keep that in context of the political campaign going on in this particular year. If you divide God's land, you can incur wrath that you don't want to. You want to be on the side of blessing Israel. And I think that is an overall context of what happens politically. And I just add that the story's not over. There's a big issue right now about what Israel's going to do in Rafah, but even bigger is what's going to happen in the north and with this battle of Hezbollah.
And the Iranian nuclear threat.
And even bigger is the Iranian nuclear threat. So it's so important to be like that watchman on the wall from Isaiah 62, that give the Lord no rest till he makes Jerusalem a praise in all the earth.
No, we need another hour, but I appreciate your time. Round of applause for our panelists.